fairly standard agenda, so and I'm sure everybody would like us to proceed briskly, which we will do, being Friday afternoon and getting ever closer to Christmas Day. So let's make a start with apologies, if that's okay.
Yeah, I've had apologies from Christine Harley from the Prisons and Probation Service, Alison Perry from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, Duncan Hamer from Welsh Government, and Mairead Bowley from the Health Board.
Okay, we still have some coming in. Apologies to those just joining. We have just started. All we've done is apologies, so you haven't missed anything. Grand. Okay. Are there any other apologies from the floor? No hands. Can't see any hands. That's grand. Okay. Thank you very much, Jochen. Let's move on to work streams then. That's item 2. So I don't know if Mairead isn't here. Anna's here though. Anna, are you taking us through 2.1?
Yep, myself and Alison Mary are here. So Alison's representing theirs today.
Great.
Yeah, hi, Alison Mary, Consultant in Public Health and Deputy Director. So I'm here on behalf of Mairead today. But in fact, Anna's going to give you an update and take you through the progress we've made since the last meeting. So if I hand over to Anna, if that's okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm just sharing my screen now, so hopefully you can all see that there. So I won't go through all the background information because I think you're all very familiar with the whole system approach and the basics behind it. But in terms of, this person next, it's not moving. In terms of where we are now, we're still following the high-level strategic action plan, which I think you received in the agenda papers. So we're following the Public Health Wales methodology, the 9-step approach. We've also created an online Padlet board. So this is somewhere where that anyone can go to at any point to see the progress. So we regularly update that with what we've done and where we're going, and if we've got any upcoming workshops and meetings, and they're all put on the Padlet board so people can stay involved in the work, I suppose. And in terms of that methodology shown on the screen now, we're on step 7. So we're looking at developing our action plan or strategic delivery plan, as we've been calling it. So a quick whistle-stop tour of where we've gone in the last sort of 2 quarters, really. We've held more workshops to kind of try and establish what our focus areas within our subsystem are. And you may remember from the last meeting that we identified those to be breastfeeding, introduction to solid foods or weaning, cooking skills, and affordability of healthy food. So these really came from a series of workshops that we worked with stakeholders and partners across the system to establish what these areas would be. And it was quite interesting because we held the same workshop in Llandrindod and Brecon, just for geographical reasons. And we actually found that we had the same 4 themes coming up at each of those sessions. So real focus on the 0 to 5 age category in particular. And then those are the 4 themes within that category that we're really zooming in on. So focusing on what we've achieved in the last quarter 3, we now have our strategic steering group up and running. So we did invite everyone who's been involved in the work to date to come to that steering group. So we presented them with terms of reference at the last meeting, and we're hopefully confirming them at the next meeting now in January. I think it's important to say that the strategic steering group isn't instead of the wider workshops that we've been holding. So we see the wider workshops as an engagement tool and something that would supplement the work of the strategic steering group. We held some planning events very recently, actually, at the end of November and in December, and we split them into 2. So the session in November focused on breastfeeding and introduction to solid foods. And then the second event focused on cooking skills and affordability of healthy food. And we're very lucky to have Kirsty Williams, the Vice Chair of Powys Teaching Health Board, chaired both those events for us. And we had quite good attendance at both events, around 15 to 20 people at each event. And what we tried to do at those events was bring stakeholders together to look at the mapping that we've already done, to look at the work that we've produced, the evidence briefings around those 4 themes, and translate what we've gathered so far into tangible actions, I suppose, to take forwards. So the actions that people developed at that workshop are going to be used to populate our strategic delivery plan, which the strategic steering group will oversee and take forwards. As well as the planning that's going on, I think it's important to note that we do have ongoing work streams that link into this subsystem of children, families and health and access to healthy food. So we've got we've got established a Healthy Start scheme task and finish group. So that fits into the affordability of healthy food category, and that's looking at trying to increase the uptake of Healthy Start scheme in Powys. It's currently around 65%, but you know, there's still more we can do to improve on that. And we've also set up a group, again, another task and finish group, really looking at the delivery of the weaning parties across Powys and trying to improve the training, the resources that come with the weaning parties. So even though we've got this planning cycle going on and the delivery plan being brought together, we still have ongoing projects that fit into the delivery plan that have already started. This is an example of what some of the actions that came up from the most recent workshops in November, December. So this isn't a finalised plan by any means, but you can see that we've started to pull out some system level actions that link to the four areas we identified. So the one I pulled up on the screen to share today is breastfeeding. So we had some really interesting conversations around what we can do to try to increase breastfeeding rates in Powys. And one of those things was around shared policies across different workforce organisations. So trying to develop a best practice guide for policies for mums returning to work who still might be breastfeeding. And I think this is one, again, where we can call on the PSB and our partners in this group to think about how does this affect our organisation and how might we be able to support this system level action. So something that we might be looking at, if this is approved by the strategic steering group, is comparing the policies that, for example, Health Board, Powys County Council, PAVO might have, and trying to pull out the best bits of each of those policies to maybe form a template that other organisations can adopt. We had one around the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative, so that's something for the Health Board to work towards. And we also had something around breastfeeding welcome scheme. So this was something you probably might have heard of in the past. It's basically a scheme where businesses can sign up to recognise that they're breastfeeding friendly. It's about displaying a sticker in the windows, about having facilities inside their shop, leisure centre, whatever it might be, to make women feel comfortable that they can breastfeed in that setting. And the same thing applies with schools and preschools as well, really. They could be part of the breastfeeding friendly scheme. So you can see that what we're trying to do here through the breastfeeding friendly scheme might be to try and change the social norm around breastfeeding. But it does require that sort of cross-organisation buy-in, support and involvement in delivering the action plan, really. So we have this one is breastfeeding, but we do have sections in the action plan focusing on introduction to solids, affordability of healthy food, and also on cooking skills, which I can share at a later date. In terms of our future plans, we've got a draft now of the strategic delivery plan based on the actions we collated. This is going to be taken to the steering group in January. We're going to share it with everyone at the workshops first to make sure they're happy with the actions, to make sure we haven't missed anything. Once we have that delivery plan signed off, it will be focusing on those 4 themes I mentioned, and it will be, I suppose, the role of the strategic steering group to oversee the delivery of that plan. We're going to continue with the wider workshops to make sure we're still incorporating stakeholder views and we're still having that system level buy-in. It's very much a shared action plan rather than being owned by any one organisation. and we really want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to shape the work going forward. We're continuing to report in terms of progress to Powys Teaching Health Board Exec Committee, obviously the PSB, and we also report to Public Health, Welsh Government via Public Health Wales. So we have a network across Wales of different health boards working across on the whole system approach that we share learning report and update on, really. So that's really a quick whistle-stop tour of where we are for Q3. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, and John, well, Anna, it leaves the display up, if you would, in case people wish to refer back to it. Leave the sharing up, if that's okay. Yeah. Are there any questions for Anna or Alison, for that matter? Hayley.
Hi,
welcome.
Thanks Anna, thanks Alison for all your work and pulling this together. I can see there's really a lot of work involved in this, and I can see also, and I've had feedback that partnership collaboration is really strong with this piece of work. I guess I had a question around the discussions that possibly the evidence, I guess, and pulling the information together about the impact of some of this, and to what extent we think we're able to track the distance travelled on some of this, the work that you're taking forward. But I was also wondering more on the sort of, I guess, policy direction point of view around the impact of decisions. I was thinking about things like, okay, we know there's a direct correlation between people making choices around food and availability of fast food, etc. So I'm just interested if there's, in the workshops, there's been discussions around to what extent checking, I don't know, planning application decisions for fast food takeaways, things like that, how that conversation's being handled as part of the work, if that's okay. And also, as a side question, Anna, I thought we'd achieved the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative status as a health board a few years back, but I might have dreamt that up. And I'm quite interested to seeing that was really important. There's some really good steps in that I think we should have in place. So I'm particularly interested in picking up that conversation with you, Anna and Alison, sort of outside the meeting, about how we can progress with that particular aspect as well. Thanks.
Shall I come in for? Is that okay if I come? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So so the questions, Hayley. So the first one is I would see the outputs from those workshops at this stage, and there are further discussions to ask people that were at those, have we missed anything? So I would see that as being our long list of actions, and then I think there's a couple of processes, and one of those is to look at those and, how do they group, and what do they mean, and have we got duplicate, how do they fit together? And Anna and myself have been having discussions about this. So for example, do a number of those fit under the heading of the breastfeeding welcome scheme that could be across the piece? But then the other bit of that is, and the bit that public health can bring in particular, others can as well, but it's about and of those which would have a strong evidence base, the strongest evidence base. Are we missing anything? And where are we best to put our energies amongst those? Because we may well end up with a list which is shorter than the initial one, but still probably impractical. So there's something about how we can hone it down, make sure it's the best use of our time and resources, and the most evidence-based that it can be. So absolutely accept that, and I think that is part of the next stage. The next one was about the other aspects. So for example, with planning and so on. So that did come out in the initial discussions of the earlier workshops, and there was discussion about planning at that stage. And part of this process has been to see, well, what is the widest system, because it is really complex, and which bits of that do we feel that we want to prioritise initially, and that's how we've honed it down to children, families, and access to healthy food. So we absolutely well aware of the planning bit, but we're not focusing on that specifically at the moment. It may be that elements of that come out, but interestingly, the other teams across Wales, some of those have picked up on planning, so there is work going on there, and there is national work going on to say, actually, you know, this has been recognised through this whole system work across the piece as really important. So it's not important, it absolutely is, but it's just the bit that we've bitten, you know, off to chew and digest at the moment isn't directly linked to planning. And then the third question was, okay, so about the UNICEF baby friendly, and yes, the health board did have that, and I think it needs some revisiting. So what we're doing is trying to understand where the health board is with that, because that has come through as one of the areas of action, and just to revisit that, and you know, does it need a refresh? So we're not quite completely sure where that is either, but and I don't know if you wanted to come in on that, but I think that's where we're at, Hayley, with that one.
Thank you.
Okay, Hayley. Yeah, thanks. Anna, did you want to comment at all?
No, that's fine. I think Alison's covered it. Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Thank you a lot. Emma.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. There's a couple of things for me. One, recognising that Powys County Council itself is a large employer in county, and the majority of our employees are also residents. And I know you've referred in terms of homing in on the breastfeeding and thinking about the breastfeeding friendly organisations. Actually, my thoughts here is we need to consider what that requires for us as a local authority to consider that before our politicians, as to whether we can in fact maybe become one of the first in county and show some of the leadership in that space. So I'd really welcome a further conversation outside of the PSB for us to explore that and to understand and establish the facilities that are required, because my logic would tell me not a lot of investment is required, but a clear statement and message can be provided. So I would welcome that. Please, Alison or Anna, outside of the meeting, so that we can have that conversation with our politicians. And then secondly, in respect of the fast food and planning, whilst I recognise what Alison was saying in regards to homing in and prioritising, again, there's nothing stopping me actually from having a conversation with officers in the council in terms of planning, and that being extended in terms of broader conversation with our planning committee, I'm sure. So I think there's just two things there that we can take away as a local authority and consider in respect of furthering our commitment to this agenda. So thank you very much.
Can I just come back and say brilliant on both? That would be fab. Absolutely welcome both of those conversations. And I think you're right with the breastfeeding welcome. I don't think it takes very much. It is literally almost, you know, have we got what people would need in order to do that in you know, and feel safe to do that and comfortable, and you know, can we let them know through a sticker or something, website, whatever? It should be a quick win. So thank you for that.
Interesting. Thank you very much, all. Really interesting points. Being somebody who visits the retail park at Merthyr quite often, and I noticed the astonishing popularity of the fast food outlets that are on the slip road as you enter the place. Yeah, planning. I suppose we have we have a new local plan process coming up. I suppose this is an issue. Should it not, Emma, be included, or Diane, in the local plan process? And what goes into the new local plan as when it comes about? I don't know. Does anybody wish to comment on that? But it would seem to be that there's nothing, as I recall, existing local plans. There's no real reference to these issues at all. You know, that planning applications are not judged against the wider health effects on the population or anything of that nature. So, very interesting. Okay, we'll leave it. We'll leave that hanging. Diane, sorry.
Apologies, leader. Yes,
No.
More than happy to try and pick this up under the how we work our new development plan, whatever that might look like, as we've not quite decided what that looks like yet. But I think it's an important area, isn't it? And really something that we could consider. Thank you.
Yeah, but and then we'd have to also consider the economic aspects as well as the healthy ones, which is a complicated picture. Let's be frank. Right. Okay. Shall we move on? If there's no further questions, that was really extremely interesting. I found that. Thank you. 2.2 is evidence and insight. Catherine, you're slated to lead on this.
Yep. Afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so this one, evidence and insight, was really objective 3, which was about working more effectively together. So we're looking at engagement and data. So for the quarter, we're on track, and hopefully you can see some detail there. So in terms of what we've actually achieved in that time, we've got a memorandum of understanding drafted amongst some of the group, and the target then for next quarter is to get that approved to help us share information more easily. We've had our first scrutiny session, so that was last week. And so that went really well. So that's another thing ticked off. We've also been attending sort of events, etc., from the other groups. So we've had some of the leads attending the Powys Food Partnership Strategy to ensure that we're linking in there wherever possible, as well as some sort of may seem more basic things, but actually they're quite important. Ensuring that we can share our files and our calendar solutions and some of the behind the scenes things more easily to make it more easy to get in touch with one another and work in a kind of virtual fashion. So we've also been planning to support the climate emergency work stream in terms of emergency with their engagement planning. So that's another thing that's been undergo. We've also been with the Regional Partnership Board trying to bring together a shared engagement plan so that we haven't got duplication across those two areas. We've got a PSB website that's currently being sort of looked at and also considered to be a joint thing with the RPB to try and bring us even closer together in those worlds. A bid has been submitted in terms of that climate conversation to help us try and pull together some engagement to support them, as well as some preparations being commenced really for February, middle of February. We've got a town and community councils event and we would really like to go there and share with them the wellbeing plan, explain that to them and how that's really important and where they fit with that. Data-wise, the group have been, even though it seems a long way off, and we only published the wellbeing assessment last year, but have been looking at the gaps that we had in that and trying to think, which are the areas that we need to plug and start to sort of look through what we need in additional data in our wellbeing information bank, as well as governance arrangements around the data and making sure we've got the right things in place that enable us to work more effectively together. And in terms of moving forward then, so it's authorising that memorandum of understanding, looking at how we can have an easy read wellbeing plan, the event with the town and community councils in February, the climate conversation event with the people of Powys, and trying to find some more funding really. At the moment we're resourced with existing engagement and data people within our groups, but we'd really like to get hold of a little bit of funding to help us explore some other engagement methods, whether that's looking at how a sort of potential citizen assembly might work or some more creative ways of engaging with people. So that's another thing that's underway, as well as making sure that we're helping out with the healthy weights work stream as well. So there's lots happening. Hopefully that gave you a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if anyone has any questions, feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. James, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Probably to add this, probably a development since the papers were issued, actually, in terms of I'll look into see how we can use this PSB evidence insight group to join up in terms of some of the engagement surrounding our future sustainability conversations. So the likes of sustainable powers to accelerate sustainability work, etc. So we are looking how we can use the PSB as a vehicle to undertake those collectively and try and do is scale it as much as possible and not have a huge amount of engagement fatigue for our residents.
Right, yeah, good point. Thank you for that. Emma's got a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, leader, and again, great to see progress in this area, and also fully endorse the as much alignment as we can in terms of engagement across the sustainable models that we're referring to in our respective organisations, because at the end of the day we are serving the same population and need to as one. I'm just wondering, and sorry to throw this in and potentially broaden the scope here on the basis that I haven't really had conversations with partners, but I just wondered whether there's the appetite for exploring such things as one public estate, for instance. So when we're looking at the sustainability model and we're looking at engaging, etc., is there the opportunity even from an asset base that we start to explore that more so as one across our respective partners, and we start thinking that through in terms of our place-based planning, and in terms of where we're located and how we're located, and then also think about potential models around a recharging model. So for instance, if we were located within a health building or in a fire or police, etc., actually we could reduce our costs, but also there could be an income for the hosting organization as well. And I just think there's something in that space that I just wonder whether there's appetite to explore that one public sector estate across Powys.
Absolutely. Hayley.
Just responding really, Emma, to that challenge. I think that the challenges that we're all facing in terms of public sector delivery at the moment means that we've got to look at everything. And I think the work that's been done under the RPB in part, so not everything, so I think it's helpful to raise it in the PSB space around asset mapping and the opportunities around that, as you say, through that shared public sector assets that we might have available, is definitely something we've got to explore. I'd be very supportive of that, and I think it's also about that longer term impact of that as well, more broadly, how we do that in partnership with the third sector and the communities itself as well. So really interested to see how we can bring a PSB approach to this, as well as what's already been done for the strategic capital planning work under the regional partnership board, because I think it is broadly that public sector asset, one public service for Powys sort of space that increasingly we need to move towards. I had two other additional points just on the engagement report. It's really helpful to see this, Catherine, and I think increasingly it's about building the picture, and as you say, the information sharing is important, because there's nothing worse or more frustrating to the public if we go back asking the same questions as separate organisations. So how we share that intelligence and information is really important. But I particularly also am quite keen to bring the issue around inequalities and, how do we get the harder to reach more on that shared basis across the public sector footprint in Powys as well, recognising that we might all have slightly different networks, but actually we can draw insights to support each other's work. And I'm really pleased that it was mentioned about how that fits with also some of the corporate arrangements that are in place around a sustainable Powys and accelerated sustainable model as well. So yeah, really good piece of work, and definitely I think the assets has got some potential opportunity for us to work much more collectively and more efficiently across Powys.
Great. I'm Gavin and Ewan waiting, but I noticed the stuff going into the chat as well, which people might want to have a look at. Gavin.
Yeah, it was just to add support in terms of that asset point, really. I think we've dipped our toes in a little bit with that task and finish group to look at accommodation across Powys PSB, but I think there's an awful lot more that we can explore, and it's one of those areas that I think isn't hampered. In some cases, things like procurement, NRW is sort of tied into that sort of national approach then, but I think the nature of this is something that we should be fairly sort of free in exploring. So yeah, would absolutely welcome that.
Right, thank you. Ewan. Ewan, please.
Thank you, Chair. And not to labour the point, but yeah, would absolutely fully support that piece of work in terms of enhanced look at that as well. And the cost of maintaining premises across the estate are just significant and ever increasing, aren't they, these days? We've got 18 sites across Powys, and the majority of them, I think all bar one actually, are only occupied for around 2 to 3 hours per week, apart from responding to calls. So we've got these sites which are vacant during the day and would absolutely welcome a conversation around some kind of joint occupation at them. We're already doing a lot of work on that front with the likes of the ambulance service, Coast Guard, and Deblu doing a bit with us on it as well. So widening that would be welcomed. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So how do we progress that strand of work? What's the best mechanism? May I be advised? Catherine?
We have a date in the diary for the 15th of January for the for CEOs to meet. So obviously that was one of the one of the main sort of, but obviously whatever comes from that, then we can take forward.
Could this issue go on that agenda? Yeah, okay, that's great, that's good progress. Excellent. Are there any other questions on Catherine and James's presentation? No? Good news. Okay, so we can move on. Who's taking us through the next item?
Is it the climate one?
Yeah, climate emergency.
Yeah,
it's Liz.
Yeah.
It's Liz.
It's me,
Yeah.
Liz Hutchins, Banabra. I'll just share my screen.
Thank you very much.
Can hand up help? Can you all see that from the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have been making really good progress on this step, and quite a lot since we last met, but also quite a lot since I wrote the paper. So this is a few slides just to walk you through that. My computer will let me click on the next slide. So just to recap, the climate emergency step is aimed at developing and delivering a plan for Powys to take our fair share of action to decarbonise in line with the Paris Agreement, to scale up carbon sequestration, which is drawing carbon from the atmosphere into nature through using natural processes, and to adapt to the impacts of climate change that we can't avoid. Clearly, we're very guided by the goals of the Wellbeing Act, which is, and one to highlight is the globally responsible Wales. So that's about taking a fair share of action, and very much about the ways of working. And so we're trying to achieve a just transition here through having a planned approach, which involves jointly imagining as well as creating the future of a net zero Powys that is fairer, healthier, and greener, as well as net zero. The strategic approach we've taken to adaptation is there's a new guidelines and framework launched by NRW, which exactly addresses our needs because it's area based and it looks at the climate impacts across a whole area, not just the operations of our public service organisations, and it includes the impact of climate change on nature as well, and we absolutely have to look at those two together. In terms of carbon sequestration, we're aligning our work with Powys' Nature Recovery Plan, and it's essential that we make sure that the work that happens to increase the ability of nature to draw down carbon happens in a way that restores natural processes and isn't just about conifer plantations. And the work that we're doing on decarbonisation, as we've discussed before, is aligned to the UN-backed Race to Zero initiative, which is this global initiative of non-state actors, so those below the nation state, taking immediate action to halve global emissions by 2030. And that's what the scientists say is needed if we're going to keep global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. So they're the strategic approaches that we're taking. You'll know that we were successful in being awarded an SPF funding, and I'm very delighted that was agreed. Since I drafted the paper, we've now finalised the funding agreement, and that's just a summary of the deliverables. So that money is until the end of been getting on with work, and quite a lot has happened since we last spoke. So we've got ongoing meetings of the Powys PSB climate working group. We had a very successful workshop in November, which was a whole day session looking through our work programme and having some strategic conversations and doing things like stakeholder mapping, and very pleased about the attendance and engagement in that, including we had Gillian Perry from NRW, who leads the Ceredigion PSB climate working group. So we've got good coordination then across Mid Wales, and that refers to, sort of relates to the conversation we had at the last board meeting about the benefits of working at certainly a regional or a Mid Wales region. So we're developing how we're organising ourselves. Like I said, we've signed the funding agreement. We have recruited 2 members of staff to work on this project, and I was absolutely delighted by the quality of applicants, and we've been able to recruit 2 people who I'm very excited to be starting working with from February. And I'll share their details in due course. And so that's one role who is going to be a climate policy officer, and another role which is a climate project coordinator. And that coordination role will include all of the work that's needed to engage with a diversity of stakeholders, so technical experts, but also kind of community and active citizens groups as part of developing the climate action plan. We've done quite a lot of work about assessing the methodologies and the tools and data sets that are out there, ready to start commissioning and developing our work. And we reported to the Powys PSB Scrutiny Board. So that's kind of the work so far. Next steps, we'll start to formally report to SPF, and we've had a briefing and know exactly what it is that they need from us. We'll be commissioning some consultancy starting early in January, looking at calculating the carbon footprint of Powys and a science-based target for decarbonisation. There'll be staff onboarding, those staff starting at the start of February, and the contracts continuing until the end of December. We've got some office space, and I guess it relates to the previous conversation. We're going to have a hub in Banau Brycheiniog Towers, so that'll be space where we can all work together physically. And I know Sarah Cokham from NRW is going to be joining us 1 or 2 days a week there as well, which is nice. We need to do further detailed work planning and further stakeholder mapping. There are 5 feasibility studies that are involved in this SPF bid, and so we have already started some of the discussions and thinking about that, but we need to do further on that. And then, as the previous contributors have said, we need to continue to coordinate with the other 2 steps, and also with the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan work. So they're the next things on our to-do list. I wanted to highlight some of the project risks and the mitigation that we're taking. We had previously identified the top 2 risks were securing SPF funding and recruitment, and we're very pleased to have sort of overcome those as hurdles. And so the next thing to draw your attention to is retention of those excellent staff, and part of the project is to fundraise to make this a more sustainable project. Clearly, this funding ends at the end of next year, but the wellbeing plan is a 5-year plan, and we want to continue to have considerable staffing across that time period, because this is phase 1 about research and developing a pipeline of fundable projects. We need obviously then to make sure those projects are organised and delivered across Powys. So retention is an issue. I think consultancy, the speed of getting that up and running in line with, really quite a tight process now to get all of the work done by the end of next year and getting it within budget. That will be a challenge that we're focusing on. And then 5 feasibility studies is a lot to deliver. And so we're going to be looking at how we can work in partnership and make sure we've got real precision in terms of the what it is that we're testing in those. At the last meeting, we discussed that the climate emergency step in the wellbeing plan very much focuses on area-based climate action. So it's about how can all of Powys decarbonise and be more resilient in the face of climate risks. clearly it's also important for us as public service organisations that we are part of the Welsh Public Sector Net Zero goal to decarbonise by 2030, and there was a request for information about what each of our organisations are doing on that. I gathered all of that information and put it into a document, and that was circulated with the papers, and to highlight that it focused on decarbonisation, sequestration and adaptation, but also looked at what our organisations are doing in terms of public engagement, in terms of climate change, and also carbon literacy within our organisations. And the latter really has shown up as there's a very great need across all of our organisations to make sure that the governance of decision making in our organisations is informed by highly literate decision makers at the top of the organisation, but that throughout the organisation, anyone who has a role in response to the climate emergency, which, let's face it, is all of us, needs also to have appropriate levels of carbon literacy. So I think that's something that we need to return to and see if there are ways that we can support each other as a PSB to respond to. So I'll leave it there. Very happy to expand on any of that.
Thanks, Liz. Interesting. Right. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Diane, please.
Hi, Liz. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really informative, and I'm also very pleased that you got your SPF funding through. Just a quick question really on terms of public engagement, and also in kind of the partner field. Within the council, we've been working with a set of stakeholder engagement group, very passionate group, and groups within themselves. So they're representatives from many other groups. So the expanse across Powys is really quite phenomenal. And I'm just wondering whether you've had discussions of how to bring that group in as part of the work you're doing under the PSB.
Not yet, but I'm aware of it, and yes, very much. We wouldn't want to duplicate any existing structures that are out there.
Thanks. And I think our members as well have got like a members working group. We've got members obviously in town and community councils across the whole of Powys that are very connected to their communities, and I think they're people as well that we need to think about in terms of that engagement and partnership working as part of the whole suite. And of course you came along to the town and community council event that the council held as part of writing their own strategies and plans. So I think it's a good network to think about including as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a great meeting, and I think that we've got a slot at the February event as well.
Good. Okay, thanks very much, Hayley.
Thanks, Liz, for the presentation. It's really helpful. I guess one of the challenges for us in this is about, yes, there's a lot of sharing information. I think it's really important that the networking between all of the staff taking forward this work across the public sector are coming together to share the information. But I guess in terms of the phasing of the work, and it's great that we've had the funding, phasing of the work, it's about the challenge of shifting from feasibility through to agreeing the high impact actions that we're taking collectively to make a difference. And I guess I'd be quite interested, Liz, as this work develops perhaps at the next meeting, to get that sort of I know there's a very complex amount of evidence base behind this, and I've done my carbon literacy training and I've got a lot to learn, but it's just there's a question for me about where do we focus our efforts. There's a lot of ambition and frustration, I'd say, from members of certainly the staff and the health board that we're not making sufficient progress on some of this work. And so I'd be really interested if we could identify maybe the top 2 or 3 high impact actions that we want to all put our weight behind as a PSB, as all partners together, and move for traction on that alongside some of the more perhaps focused work around feasibility. So I'm wondering if that's planned, and if not, whether we could make that commitment that we try and focus on that delivery high impact actions quite quickly, in sharing the expertise and making sure that we're getting that in place. Thanks.
Liz, do you want to respond?
Yes, so The difference between this approach and ones that have happened before is that we're trying to understand, have a strategic understanding of what the carbon footprint of Powys, including scope 3, which is embodied emissions. So it's the emissions in all the things that we consume, which previous research didn't include. And out of that, to be able to understand that the high impact actions. And so the Race to Zero framework that we're using has 5 Ps that guide us. So there's the first step is about understanding the carbon footprint and the decarbonisation, fair share decarbonisation target, and pledging to achieve that. The second one is planning. So having a strategic action plan that understands what are the big changes, what are the systems shifts that are needed in any area to decarbonise. The third P is progress, and so we need to be getting on with these things. We don't need every tiny bit of analysis finished before we actually progress with things. And so part of this will be understanding what are the kind of early indications of the no regrets options and the big impact options, and getting on with that before even we've finished all of the analysis. And then that there is there's publish and sort of persuade the other ones. I think it is really important, though, that we don't just have a go at doing some things that feel good on climate change, because frankly that has not delivered in the past and is not delivering anywhere around the world. What is delivering and what is scaling up action in the only way that I think is giving me hope globally is organisations that are following this 5-step approach and are being really strategic about the action that's needed. So it's kind of yes and is the answer to that. Yes, we will be identifying some high impact actions as soon as possible, and some of them are evident to me at this stage anyway, particularly around food production and consumption. I think there's really big systems change that can be achieved there, and that's particularly useful for the kind of the 3 steps we've got for the PSB. But I kind of make no apologies also for having this really evidence-based approach, because it's that evidence-based approach around the world that has driven a new scale and speed of action. It might be slightly counterintuitive to go back to basics, but honestly, once you have the evidence base and you have the strategic analysis, then everybody can get behind it with confidence. And it's that mark of credibility that puts us at the top of the list for investors when we do come up with a pipeline of fundable projects. They know we've gone through this analysis process and they know there's rigour behind it.
You happy with that, Hay?
Yes, yeah, I am. I think it's a very fine balance, isn't it? And I hear what you're saying, Liz. I just think it's just with the impact. What I want, it's not about feeling good about it. It's about choosing those which have the greatest impact, as you say, Liz, which is that strategic approach. And I guess the question for me is, to what extent can we, if we already know what they are, can we start that action now alongside the further analysis that's required? So that's really helpful. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, well, I guess the asset sharing conversation would be a good start, wouldn't it? But that is bound to be a step in the right direction in terms of reducing collective carbon footprint. So that's something I would have thought we could make early progress on. Reese,
thanks.
welcome.
Welcome. Sorry, first time I've been to the meeting, so really, really good to be here. Thanks, Liz. Really interesting presentation.
Could you just introduce yourself then, because some people won't know who you are.
Absolutely. So, Rhys Morris, I'm the Chief Regional Officer for North, Mid and West Wales. So that effectively means I lead the Welsh Government regional economy teams across those 3 regions.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
So this is just a question more on some of the stakeholder engagement and what kind of happens at the back end, really, Liz. So while it's fresh in my memory, I had a conversation yesterday with the grid companies who were expressing a bit of concern about the understanding of future energy infrastructure needs for the grid, particularly when we start looking at decarbonisation in the domestic market as we start to move towards potentially heat pumps or something else which is moving away from fossil fuel. And they feel that their data is quite patchy, but they are making representations to the main grid network next year which will then essentially set that work plan for the next 5 years. So just making sure that you're engaged with the grid companies, just to keep them on board, so that the infrastructure is there when you're ready to take those next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having clear modelling that shows the energy transition that is needed in Powys, down to the level of, you know, number of households, types of technologies and so on, in a way that is in line with our fair share of action, is critical. And what's happened in Cardiff Capital Region is they had their regional energy strategy that was developed some time ago. They've looked at that in relation to fair share decarbonisation trajectory and ratcheted up the ambition of it. And now they're working to develop local area energy plans that are more ambitious than they otherwise would have been, because they're on a path to join Race to Zero. So those are exactly the conversations that we're having with Gemma Delafield in terms of the Mid Wales region. And I joined the meeting of the Powys local area energy plan last week, or within the last 10 days. And one of the issues I raised was consideration of a decarbonisation trajectory on energy that is in line with the Paris Agreement, which I don't think it is at the moment. So, and not to underestimate the challenge of what's starting to be scoped out, but it may need to be even more ambitious. And so we need to know actually what does that mean in terms of grid infrastructure. And alongside that, we're having really interesting conversations with community energy groups that are envisaging developing grid capacity at a hyper-local level. So what does it mean to generate renewable energy, but also have battery storage below a substation level that reduces the need for an upgrade in the grid infrastructure, which just may not be forthcoming in the timescale that we need.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Liz.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Liz, for the presentation and the work that the group are starting to undertake now, particularly as officers now that they're appointed. I think for me, there's a few things in that. One, the agenda that's ahead of us is serious. We all know that. We get that, and you know, we've got to take this forward in the best way that we can. So there is that commitment from us in respect of addressing the climate emergency, but also the nature recovery side as well. And for me, there's increasing pressure around walking the talk, as you can imagine, and seeing the actions that we need to take forward collectively. And so there's a few things in my mind. I completely agree with what Hayley's saying in terms of the high impact actions. You know, we need some help around that, and a steer to make sure that we get the greatest bang for our buck, really, and the difference that we can make. So hopefully, you know, if we can accelerate the research, we collectively, I think, need to move beyond the research and theory in terms of actually what does that then mean for us in Powys. So I think there's also some other things that we can do that are slightly lighter touch, which would be when the Future Generations Act came out, what I found really helpful, on their website they had things called simple changes. And they really were simple changes, and they were things that were helpful to us as organisations that we could move forward. And I'm just thinking about wider society and our citizens of Powys. So actually we could probably do some comms around think local, act personal, and can we give steers on, you know, a collective campaign around that, where people think about their individual action they take, as well as, I appreciate we're in the strategic space as well, but I think there's something around influencing behavioural change. We're under some pressure within the local authority to come up with a costed plan. So I'm sure other organisations will want the same in respect of we need to understand the costs of what we take forward and where we invest the resource. So you know, any work that can come out of the partnership and help us in that space collectively will be really appreciated. And I think the main thing is about being progressive. So I'm kind of thinking on the document that was in our pack, there was a mention in terms of skills. And I'm thinking, okay, so we need to understand what the skills gap is in Powys. I know it's broader than Powys, but what is the skills gap in Powys? How do we then link with the regional skills partnership? So Di, I know you represent us in terms of the partnership there, but how do we link with the regional skills partnership? How is that then influencing the Mid Wales Education Partnership and ultimately our curriculum and our offer? Because we've got to do full circle. Otherwise, we're not going to have the courses for us to develop our young people, or actually adult age as well, in terms of that skills gap. So I want to make sure we're making the links between the respective partnerships to help us take the agenda forward. So I think there's a few quick wins in terms of simple changes. I appreciate the research needs to be undertaken. I think we've got to challenge ourselves to move beyond the research in terms of where are we going to focus for those high impact areas, and how we can collectively as a partnership move beyond that research and theory into tangible action to start seeing that tangible difference. I hope that makes sense. Sorry, there was a lot in there, Liz, but thanks for everything that everyone's doing in this space.
Thanks, Emma. Do you want to comment, Liz?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. Yeah, I'd yeah, so I agree with all of that, and there's quite a lot to think about there, and perhaps some further conversations, particularly in relation to the skills and the training and everything. So if we can get some sort of modelling about the scale and type of job shift needed in Powys, that could feed in very well together with an understanding of what the current sort of capacity is. And those conversations haven't been joined up yet, so perhaps Diane, we can work out how to do that. I absolutely agree that behaviour change within our organisations, but also in the public, is going to be really, really important, and we shouldn't assume that people know the basics of what it is they need to do. The Welsh Government launched a behaviour change initiative about 2 months ago now, which has some kind of a strategic approach how to do it, but also some key messages. I think what it didn't come up with was the communications assets that make these stories engaging and tangible and relatable and kind of emotional, because we need an emotional connection with people. And so that's something that we certainly should be sort of picking up, and that could be part of what we do with the the other step on evidence and insights, like how are we engaging with communities in a way that is genuinely both listening to their needs and wants, but also is impactful in terms of sharing the actions that are needed, because we need people to have an informed view on climate change, not just a knee-jerk view. So let's pick that up. I think the costed plan, that's interesting. So the work, and very timely actually to raise that, because the work that we're looking to commission about the carbon footprint of Powys is looking at like all of Powys, of which it kind of as a Russian doll public sector organisations are part. But if it could be that we could find out, is it just the local authority, or are there other organisations on this call who want some support with unpacking your own operational carbon footprint, and what that means in terms of a costed action plan, and that potentially could be rolled up into one piece of analysis. I'm very aware that there is we just absolutely don't want to duplicate any work that's already happened, and spatially the organisations in this on this call cover different areas, and I know, for example, Health Board, you've got very advanced health focused sort of approach to decarbonising the health sector, so it could be that that's not needed there, but yeah, really happy to kind of hear from colleagues here to see if that's something that you want this project to look at as well. Gavin's got his hand up.
Yeah,
Apologies, I'm on mute. I don't know what happened there. Gavin, by all means.
Yeah, just sort of on that point, really. I guess there's also, the climate change risk assessment should also help to inform those things. It's not just about doing extra things, it's about how we change some of the things that we're currently doing and tweak and adjust those things to make the changes that we need to, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation. So yeah, there's an important role there for that as part of that sense making then. So.
Thank you. Yeah, Emma mentioned things like the regional skills partnership and our wider education in the schools agenda. So how are we to make those? It's really important those linkages are made. Are you, Liz? Are you in touch with the regional skills partnership at all, or have you?
I'm not. No, for me, it's a really good time to start that conversation, because it would be good to know what do they need from this project to inform that work. So perhaps, Diane, we could have a catch up about that.
Yeah, well, also, Diane, you could tie in the work that's going on through the growth deal and things like that as well, because there's the projects in there which would be very relevant to this agenda.
Yes, more than happy, Leader.
Yeah, great. Okay, so you can tie up all those ends together. That's excellent. Great.
And then sorry about having a costed action plan for the operational decarbonisation of PSB organisations. From the Powys County Council point of view, I can have a catch up with Tom Yeo about that. Is that a good next step? Are there any other organisations where you don't have a decarbonised action plan for your organisation and would like to consider working together to help you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess everyone wants that, don't they? All the organisations, want
but
that.
I think some organisations perhaps have them underway.
Yes, I suppose costed. I don't know. Does any of the organisations represented here? I mean, obviously, Welsh Government probably does, but maybe doesn't. Hayley.
Yeah, Liz, I'd welcome. I know Steve and the team, would want to connect with you on this. Although we've got a decarbonisation plan, etc., I think it's about sharing and taking that together. So I'll pick it up with the team and get them to make contact with you, Liz. Thanks.
Ewan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, much like Hayley's response, really, we've got a lot of work underway, but I would like to take up the opportunity of sense checking that with you, Liz, if we could.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Great. Okay. Don't have any other hands. So thank you very much for that presentation and the discussion, which was really useful, I think, which leads us nicely on to you, and you were the last contributor. So it's you are the next item on the agenda with
thank you, Chair, and
thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to run through this presentation with you on our draft community risk management plan. I'll try and share my screen now, which will be the most challenging thing of the day for me.
Yep, it's happening.
Oh, it's good. Hopefully you can all see that.
Yes.
Well, there are a number of slides, but I'll skip through most of them. I'll pause on some of the most important ones then, really. So in terms of our planning process, we as a service we still work to the Local Government Wales Measure 2009. It's repealed for local authorities some years ago. It wasn't really designed for us as a fire and rescue service, but it was all that was available at the time, and we're waiting on a new framework so that we report our performance through that. But at this moment in time, we're still reporting through the measure. So those are some of the guidelines set out there for our planning processes. I think in terms of our community risk management plan, we've developed one strategy now, delivered on one focus strategy and set of objectives, as opposed to historically having two separate plans: an annual performance plan, business improvement plan, and then a longer term 5-year corporate strategy. So we've morphed that into one plan, and that is now extending over the longer term through to 2040. And with the intent of developing a service through that period, step by step along that line, to be fit for the future. I think there are some things at this moment in time that don't really support that longer term thinking for us, and I suppose many of the organisations in the room today will be suffering the same from annual budget setting processes, which don't really support longer term thinking. We're at the period now of hopefully setting a budget for next year. If it goes to plan, we'll be operating with that intent from April onwards. If it doesn't go to plan, or if you don't get the settlement through, as for the others on the call, then it allows a very short period to react to that. And what you end up with are just reactive organisations that have been built on a series of Lego blocks, really over a number of years, which just go from short period to short period. So accept that there are difficulties in longer term planning with the current setup of our financial planning, but hopefully we'll be able to align those through buying from across the board, from politicians, from communities, from partners, etc., over this period. And that's not to say that we're not going to do anything in the short or medium term. That is all longer term. There's certainly incremental steps that will happen to gradually shift the service through that period. I think number 3 and 4 there, in terms of our purpose and the community element, arguably for me, maybe they should be the other way around. Not to say that one has to come before the other, but in terms of our purpose, we put down there that we refocus on what we're about as a service, as a fire and rescue service, of prevention, protection and response being our main focus areas. But I do think that an engagement will be a strong theme throughout this plan, that the community have to assist us in informing us about that purpose. We think we know what we are as a fire and rescue service, but they need to be able to tell us what they need from us as a service, not just for 2023, but onwards from there as well. And just to assist that, really, when we look at our data, and data is coming in under number 5 there in terms of implementation, all the information will be data led. 25% of our activity these days is to do with fire. Just a quarter of our activity, and we come on to the model and why our model looks like it does in the later slides. As part of this, we also looked at our vision. We had a vision, mission, and not sure if other organisations are still on vision and mission, but what came back for us as an organisation was people didn't just see what the mission was all about. So we've got a vision, and we've refocused that to be more local in terms of a narrower focus just on Mid and West Wales, the area that we have to deliver for. And we've got behaviours. So we've got 6 behaviours there that are central to our delivery. So in terms of the actual plan, there are 8 objectives in there. I say it runs through to 2040. I'll run through them if I can. The first one there is culture, and that will be no surprise to anyone who's seen sight of national news over the last 6-12 months or so, in terms of the focus fire and rescue has had in terms of some of the culture and behavioural matters that come to the fore across the whole of the UK. So there's been a national focus. We've run an audit, a survey through our staff. We'll have an action plan in place to deliver on some improvements there internally over the coming period. We've also introduced a Speak Up helpline, which is an independent reporting helpline for staff to be able to raise any concerns that they have. And there are about another 6 actions that we will focus on and deliver on through that shift of culture. We have to focus on the diverse makeup of the organisation as well. We are primarily white male men, unfortunately, within the organisation. Oops, they're going back. The second objective there is the on-call. This is quite key for Powys as an area. The service across Powys is based on an on-call structure, and as is the bulk of Mid and West Wales, to be honest, and it's the backbone of the service. Yet the system that we operate is something that's been in place since the 1950s, and I think absolutely arguably then, I should say, it's probably broken past the point of repair. We are currently trying to make some changes to the system in the shorter term, but over the longer term, it needs some fundamental changes to ensure that there's a system there that is robust enough and sustainable enough, and can be delivered within budget for the communities. But it's linked to what do we need to be doing as a fire and rescue service. So the model at this moment in time is based on that fixed asset in your community, in a fixed location, and the staff being able to have freedom of movement in a very short circle around that fixed location. And it doesn't work with societal changes these days. Society's moved on from the 50s, work within the area. Life was within a narrow field altogether. So we need to find a solution to that will be fit for the future. Fire stations is the next one that links in with that earlier conversation around that shared asset, and whether that's based on place-based themes, etc. But our fire stations, and if you can see, I'm sure if you can see the map on the wall behind me, and the 56 fire station locations that are across Mid and West Wales, all bar two of them, actually one of them in Llandrindod, which just moved within the town slightly, but one new site built in the Gwaencaig Girwen area, not far from Ammanford, some 10 years ago. The rest of the map has been as is, and I would say probably before every one of us on this call today were born. So they're there just because they've always been there, and again, haven't adjusted or adapted according to societal needs. So we need to have a look at where they are in terms of that best service provision according to the risks in the area going forward. And if we look at the risks in the area, and if we look at operations there in terms of that call activity, you're saying 25% of our activity is fire related these days. Majority of our calls are rescue related. Our fire calls, we heard about climate change earlier on, wildfires on the increase and flooding on the increase. And yet we see there in Objective 8, vehicles we need to look at. The design of a fire engine looks very much the same as it did in the 1950s. So in terms of being the most suitable type of vehicle to carry the most suitable type of equipment that we need to address the risks in our areas these days, we need to be able to shift and change that thinking. Community is risk number 5, so it's absolutely key to how we go about redesigning service for the future, and a number of actions under community there. First one be coming live in April of 2024, and that will be changing the way we respond to automatic fire alarm actuations. So over the last couple of decades, responses to alarm actuations have just increased and increased year on year. And it's not necessarily the fire and rescue services risk in terms of responding, it's the premises owner's risk. We will absolutely respond to scenes of fires there, but we're not there to go and check somebody's alarm system out. So we won't be responding to the bulk of those calls. We will respond to some higher risk premises from April onwards, but the bulk we won't respond to. And that makes up probably around a quarter of our activity as well. So that will reduce significantly from April onwards. Our home safety interventions, they need to vary. We've been doing those for close to 2 decades now, and they've delivered some significant results to sort of, ensuring people are safer in their homes. But one size doesn't fit all, and the advice to somebody who lives on a street where there is a fire station has to be slightly different to the advice for somebody that lives 20, 25, 30 minutes away from the nearest fire station. So we need to be able to develop and build on that that preventative advice. I think we've been through a number of levels of the preventative approach, and we're getting to the real fine end of that now in terms of improving the preventative approach that we've got. Wildfire and arson, children and young people will be key as well. The educational approach that we've built in, again, close to 2 decades since we've been doing that, and starting to reap the rewards now there of actual response activity and numbers of fires reducing because of educational input, or partly because of educational input. And I say engagement with the community is key. I'm really keen, and if we are looking at some kind of joint engagements and communications in the new year as a public sector, then I'd be absolutely keen to be part of that, because we do need that steer from the public. I think they need to understand what their risks are, and we need to have this open conversation with them about what is fit for the future, because we got to accept that the model that we have at this moment is not sustainable for a number of reasons, not just in terms of performance and the best services available for the public, but in terms of cost as well. And that, we look at vehicles, a fire appliance now, a fire engine is close to £400,000, and we've got almost 80 of those across the Mid and West Wales area. That's a lot of taxpayers' money tied up in vehicles across the service. And yet those vehicles don't move very far outside of their own small communities. So we need to be flattening those peaks and troughs then with our vehicle movements. Tied into that then is net zero, in terms of a programme to reduce our carbon impact, and we've already started a lot there. Our new compartment fire behaviour training unit in the south of the area is a newly developed function that captures all the emissions that come out, because at this moment in time, when we do each of our close to 900 firefighters will train on hot fire BA training once every 2 years. And when we do that hot fire training, the real fire scenario that burns to atmosphere. So our new system is capturing all those emissions. So that's already a positive step for us, and that will be live within the next couple of months in the south of the service area, that is, not in the south of Powys area. Electric fire appliances and UV vehicles, and there are a number of actions under there too. So that's essentially the plan. If you do get a moment, I would really appreciate a response to some of the questions on the consultation. It's open until the 15th of January, except everybody's busy, but if you do get a moment, please take a look at it. Diolch yn fawr. That's it. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you. Good. It's me. Quite a comprehensive presentation, so thank you very much. Are there any questions for you? And it all sounded very interesting and sensible. Gavin.
Yeah, I guess rather than questions, just some points really. That point around annual budget setting and the challenge of that in relation to being able to think and plan for the long term, I think is something that's common across several different organisations, along with that wider point around quite deeply sort of ingrained expectations from the public in terms of the services that are expected and how they're delivered, and the need for multiple different reasons for needing to change that, and clearly the challenges in trying to do that and communicate that, which I know that we've touched on recently about how we can potentially work together as PSB partners in trying to support each other with that, and I think that broader broader landscape in terms of, particularly in terms of, the financial position and outlook and climate change, I think are things that are largely common across all of our organisations, and maybe something that we need to help to sort of set that backdrop to support some of the specific changes that we need to be exploring.
I completely agree. Absolutely agree with that. Hayley.
Yeah, just building on your point, Gavin. I think there's a question for me about Iwan, just after this period now, what next in terms of the timetable that you've got? Because I think that alignment piece will be quite important. And I do wonder, I know we've been talking about taking a approach around geographical footprints for supporting our planning discussions with the public, whether we can broaden that conversation, Iwan, to take on board all of PSB partners around that as well. But I guess I'm quite interested in what happens after the closing date on the consultation period that you've got, Iwan. Thanks.
Thanks, Hayley.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. So once that consultation closes now, hopefully we get a number of responses. We'll consider those, we'll feed those through to authority, and they will approve or make some changes to the plan and publish accordingly. So that'll go live from April onwards. The plan, what it doesn't show on the slideshow there, the plan that's on the PDF document on our website has got some indication of timelines under each of the actions. So some of them will kick in immediately from 2024. But in terms of that place-based, and that is a challenge, really, particularly because, well, I don't know if you've seen the news in terms of North Wales, they've tried to make some changes now. It do tend to draw in the rep bodies, and the argument gets political, and it's always very difficult to try and make those changes. Hence why I think we can start early, have those conversations early, and try and get the crews on board with some of these changes, because I don't think if we wait for the cut in the budget and have to react to that, then it is a reduction in service. This hopefully is a redesign of the service to ensure that it's sustainable in the longer term. And that will be my attempt to message with the crews, albeit I've got to be wholly conscious of the fact that it can go array in terms of rep bodies, but zones and place-based are absolutely key. And I think if we could start that conversation in the new year in terms of aligning that where we currently are with our computer system of what it's saying in terms of risks and what services we need to put in place, then that would be really good.
Thanks, Ewan. Are there any other questions? Yeah, I think the issue on sustainability is really, really important, because at the moment, I mean, probably, I don't know how many people on the call understand how the fire service is funded. I suspect not everybody. It's funded it's funded by it levies. It imposes a levy on the constituent local authorities. So in Ewan's case, how many local authorities? 5, is it? 5, 6. Well, I'm going to count. So and last year and this year, it's had to levy at levels which, frankly, I think the local authorities are finding hard to accept. And I'm not being unkind. I think members are strongly questioning now. In the past, levy has been a small part of the council tax demand. It's now a bigger part of that, and there is a view that this is just not a sustainable way to go on. So I think the need for the same restructure which everybody else is going to have to go through to stay within the financial envelope for the fire service is as acute as it is for everybody else, and we're going to have to support the fire service in doing that. And one of the ways I think we can achieve that is by saying, well, look, the current as they are, these costs are going to escalate to a point which the public will find unacceptable, however much they value the fire service, and it is massively valued. Probably most people would view it as the most popular, perhaps with the ambulance service service of all. People really do value the local fire service so much. but we're reaching cost points which are becoming impossible to sustain. So I think we will, as a PSB, we will have to be very supportive of each other in all of these changes, and not especially for the fire service, I suspect, and understand and support what they're doing in order to get it into a service that's more fit for purpose, which is you and I think made the point that in many aspects it's not anymore, and bring it up to a modern fit for purpose service. Great. So thank you very much for that, Ewan. I think it was really, really useful. Now, I've made a real bad boo-boo as chair. I should have asked Diane to come in from Powys County Council to make a presentation on the climate issue, and I should have done that straight after Liz's presentation because they would have dovetailed together nicely. But I didn't do that, so apologies. My apologies, Diane. Now is if that's okay, we'll go back to the issue of climate. Because Diane has a presentation she'd like to make to the PSB. So the floor is yours, Diane. It was rather late. My apologies.
No worries at all. I think this is in direct response to a request from the PSB at the last meeting to actually have a look at some of the plans for each of the partner organisations. So this is a plan for the council in terms of climate, and I've called with our board is actually called Climate and Nature. We've kind of joined the two together. So sorry if I touch a bit on the nature side and don't just stick to the climate element. So our climate agenda is really set in place by our corporate plan for Stronger, Fairer, Greener Powys, which sets out the ambitions to be stronger, fairer, and particularly greener in terms of ensuring a greener future for Powys, where our well-being is linked to that of the natural world and our response to the climate and nature emergencies in the heart of everything we do. So it's a total wraparound across our corporate improvement plan. Just obviously in terms of our declarations of becoming net zero. So on the 24th of September in 2020, we made a Powys climate emergency declaration was declared by full council, and then on the 13th of October we declared a nature and biodiversity emergency. We've been working on a whole set of plans and trying to look at what we're doing as an organisation and how we take that forward. And we commissioned a piece of work by Netherwood Solutions to come in and actually look at the work we were doing and challenge ourselves really. Are we set out on the right way? Are we covering everything we need to cover? Are we focusing on the right things? Have we got the right leadership? So Alan came in, spoke to many of us across the organisation and of course linked with Liz and the PSB to really look at how do we reprioritise ourselves and are we working correctly. So we came up with 8 priorities. We're working through those now to make sure that we pick up on all the elements and don't miss anything that might fall in the gaps. Also our carbon accounts inform us of for our own emissions what we need to focus on. 2022-23 carbon emissions really show us across most local authorities our biggest carbon emitter is in the supply chain, so in the goods and services we buy. But of course, when you buy things and the amount of carbon emissions is related to the value of your purchase, as costs rise, it seems like you're emitting more, but you're not. It's just the way it's calculated. So we need to get underneath those figures, really understand every element of what we're purchasing and how we can decarbonise those by working with the people that we're purchasing from. So it's not easy to actually decarbonise your supply chain. And I'm sure you're all finding the same. So we set a strategy, which is called Net Zero Council 2030, a couple of years ago in 2021. We've got some key workstream areas. They remain largely the same as we set out at the beginning, and they didn't really need to change after the work of Alan Netherwood, but some areas needed strengthening. So I think we've got an action plan and some key benefits and the difference we want to make through each of those areas, which I won't go into in detail. We are coming up with our more detailed plans and trying to cost them, but it's the challenge, isn't it? As you always find, do you stand still and do nothing until you got the plan, or do you just go ahead and do some things, hoping that what you're doing isn't the wrong thing? And we do know that our schools are really suffering from kind of high energy bills, etc. So we did manage to secure some funding to decarbonise some of our schools, and we've been putting in different initiatives, all as feasibility pieces really, to understand the difference it's making. And we even have the children in the schools monitoring the apps, understanding the difference solar might make, or putting in insulation, and they kind of monitor their energy usage and where we're bringing in those education and skills. So this is just a few of the things we're doing. So we've got all sorts of funds coming in and all sorts of things that we're looking at. And I think for us, it's kind of working with what have we got to do ourselves, and what can we do together as a set of partners. And for us, it's those where those spheres meet, really, isn't it? About our common goals, climate risk mitigation and adaptation, the carbon sequestration, which all link to the presentation from Liz earlier. But the resilient communities is probably our hardest challenge. We're also looking at how we govern ourselves and how we work in partnership with all of our partners and those spheres of influence. Obviously, we've got direct control over our own operations, buildings, travel, etc. And what we procure and commission, we've got to do a lot more work and working with the people that we purchase from. But we've also got a role in terms of shaping places and utilising our powers to develop things for the future, like designing how our transport works, and then also showcasing and innovating and piloting all of the things we're doing. We need to share across all of our partner bodies as well, because we can all learn from each other. Our partnerships in terms of leading and bringing people and organisations together, like stakeholders and different organisations. So kind of putting on business events where we can create the space for businesses to collaborate together on subjects such as climate. And involve and engage in the community is the biggest sphere of influence. So we had to look at so how are we managing this, and what kind of picture are we looking at the moment? It's really complex. Climate and nature covers everything and is in everywhere. So over on the right hand side, we've got our climate and nature board, which different boards set up under different reasons. We've obviously got a Powys Nature Recovery Partnership as well. And we've also got the public sector collaboration and the PSB. There's the next row to the left being key to that. We've also got regional strategic partnerships that we work in and the complexity of those. And then obviously we've got rivers management as well, which is totally connected to the environment. And then we're looking at, so what are the enablers as well in terms of our housing strategy, our education, local development plan, and it just goes on, doesn't it? So the picture is very complex, and it's the kind of area we work in as local organisations, isn't it, to trying to make sure that all works together harmoniously and that we don't trip over each other, but actually work together to make the most difference. Obviously, we talked about the Share Prosperity funding that we've been trying to support, but Share Prosperity has supported over £2 million worth of decarbonisation just in the funding that's been approved in the last year, and there's more to come through for next year over lots of different areas. But I think Lydia, you picked up on one about farms and gardens, and social farms and gardens are also part of that picture, local supply chains. So the coverage is very broad. And then obviously in terms of, in the previous year, we had UK Community Renewal Fund as well. And we were testing out and feasibility studies, things like local electric sweepers and helping the Green Heart Wales, the Cynefin project, which is Centre for Alternative Technology, and looking at that skills development as well. And that's about it. I could have gone on forever, I think, in terms of what we're doing, but I tried to give you a flavour as per the request.
Thank you very much, Diane. So are there any questions for Diane around that? So that's just the Powys County Council perspective on this huge issue, and that doesn't, so that's duplicated across every organisation and the complexities that affects them all. Does anybody wish to ask Diane? Oh yes, Alison. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Diane. That's really interesting. And it's not a question. I just wanted to highlight a couple of links that just sprang to mind. And one is that have come out of the work that we're doing. So one is about we've had growing schemes and access to locally grown food coming through the other bits that we didn't highlight in the action plan that we talked about earlier in terms of the healthy weights work. And then just another potential link is we talked a little bit earlier about breastfeeding, and what we've highlighted through the work we've been doing is actually there's a really high carbon cost that is associated with formula feeding, which isn't immediately obvious. So it's just really to say, that I think, Dan, that's really interesting, and I can already see lots of links.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Alison. Anybody else wish to ask anything? So just to show that there is a lot going on in the council, and if any other organisations wish to present at future PSB meetings, just to give us all a flavour of what's happening there. And it's also where I suppose of us making judgments about where there's any duplication taking place, whether we can better coordinate these efforts. But anyway, thanks very much, Dan. That's really helpful, and thanks for bringing that all to us. So next item on the agenda, if there's no other further questions, is I'd like to welcome Jenny McConnell, please, to talk about Cymru Can. And I'll give you the floor, Jenny. Tell us all about this, please.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me here. So yeah, I'm Jenny. I'm a change analyst at the Office of the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales. And I'm just going to give a bit of a presentation about the Act, because sometimes it's quite good to have a bit of a refresher before I start going into the jargon of it all. And I'll then talk about Cymru Can, which is our new strategy. And I know some of you in the room now, the virtual room, were involved in the engagement work we did for that. So thank you so much for your contributions. So just a sort of overview of the Act, I guess, to provide a bit of context from the perspective that we're coming from. So the Wellbeing Act came in 2015, very much based on existing work on sustainability done at the UN level, so the Sustainable Development Goals. And as I mentioned, there's quite a lot of different terminology around the Act, but fundamentally it's based on this principle about acting in a manner which seeks to ensure that the needs of the present are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this is the guiding principle underpinning everything. But to make things a little bit more specific and specific to Wales, the Wellbeing Act sets out these 7 wellbeing goals. So a prosperous Wales, which is about the type of kind of economic growth that we want to see in Wales. So one that's productive but also low carbon. A resilient Wales, so Wales in which nature and biodiversity is protected and enhanced. A healthier Wales, so a society where healthy behaviours for protecting both physical and mental health are kind of promoted and available to everyone, so everyone's able to make those choices, and society kind of enables that too. A more equal Wales, so Wales in which everyone has kind of equality of opportunity regardless of their socioeconomic background. A Wales of cohesive communities, so where people feel safe, most importantly, where communities are viable and well connected. A Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, so a Wales which is promoting its Welsh language. And I should say these slides are available bilingually, which I'll send across, but I have, I'm speaking to the English ones. A Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, so looking at our heritage, our history, and kind of promoting that in an integrated way. So if we're talking about landscapes, referring to how that refers to our cultural heritage and sense of place, as well as the importance of protecting biodiversity and nature. And then a globally responsible Wales, so looking at how the actions we're having here, what impacts that those are having beyond the borders of Wales. So this relates to carbon output and kind of nature, but also thinking about things like how we're welcoming refugees, and what our kind of more global supply chains are doing in terms of promoting the values and ethics that we want to. So kind of bearing all these things in mind. And in terms of how we get to those goals, the Act also sets out these kind of 5 ways of working. So making sure that the way that we're implementing these wellbeing goals are also, the process is also kind of sustainable and as holistic as possible and as integrated as possible. So firstly, long term, so trying to balance short-term needs with the needs to kind of look longer term in the future, fundamentally thinking about future generations, particularly important in the context of just kind of budget cuts and things, which kind of, and has been discussed a lot today actually. So we're really trying to think longer term. Integration, so looking at how well-being can be considered in an integrated manner, and again there's been so many examples of that discussed today. A simple one to consider is kind of looking at active travel, so looking at how that's delivering against health benefits as well as carbon benefits, and maybe using those interventions to promote biodiversity at the same time. Involvement, so genuinely involving people, sharing decision making as much as possible when designing programs, interventions, or making decisions. So delivering genuine co-production and ideally going beyond traditional surveys and consultations, but engaging people effectively and reaching out to people who might be a bit underrepresented within traditional power structures. Collaboration, so working, I mean, the PSB is the best example of this probably, working across different organisations, different sectors, reaching out to the private sector, voluntary sector, as a means to share resource, pool resource, share expertise, and again, the kind of current context of budgets, climate change and systems level issues kind of really make this necessary. And then prevention, which is very linked to long term, but kind of looking at future trends data and working out what you can do now to make any problems that are occurring now like less bad in the future. So if we're looking at health inequalities or the impact that climate change might have on inequalities, kind of looking what interventions can be made now, or what kind of critiquing the design of programs with that kind of main question in mind, basically. And the Act applies to public bodies, and it established the Public Service Board, but I don't need to explain that to you. So as I'm sure you're all aware, Derek Walker started his position as the new Future Generations Commissioner back in March of this year, and he's the second commissioner after 7 years of having Sophie Howe. So we have taken this time to kind of reflect on what's gone well, and where there's room for improvement in terms of what our office is delivering, and how Wales is progressing as a whole in terms of delivering the Act. So we undertook a wide range of kind of involvement work, but also kind of reviewing all the existing materials that had already been developed, like all the wellbeing assessments from the 2 rounds of PSB wellbeing assessments that we'd had, for example. There is more detail online about the methodology, but I'm not going to go into loads of detail about that now because I know time is of the essence. We developed kind of 5 key missions emerging from the evidence, which thankfully wasn't that far departed from the existing kind of frameworks of well-being that we already use. So we often talk about the kind of cultural, social, economic and environmental dimensions of well-being. Is another way to kind of cut the pie in terms of defining what sustainable development means. And the missions that kind of emerged from our findings aligned really well to that, all underpinned by a sort of implementation and impact focus. So kind of reviewing I think there's a lot of grand ambitions in Wales, but kind of recognising the challenges of, you know, the COVID pandemic, Brexit, cost of living. So kind of recognising like where there's a bit of an implementation gap with public bodies and PSBs, and helping basically working out what we can do as an office to provide as much support in that as possible. Working with other people, obviously. So the 5 missions are sort of culture and Welsh language, so reinforcing the positive impact of cultural well-being as a central tenet of well-being within Wales. There's, well, I'll go into that in the next slide, but yeah, we kind of recognise that this was a bit of a like maybe a less understood aspect of well-being, or like less well defined in comparison to social, economic and environmental. So working out how we can support public bodies in that a bit more. Health and well-being will focus on a lot of similar conversations have been had today around kind of prevention, social determinants of health, and social determinants of health and Marmot principles and things. So kind of looking at how we can bring people together in that space to kind of really interrogate where the systems are failing people on a societal level, really. Helping to transition Wales to a well-being economy. So this is about kind of interrogating the sort of growth that we want to see within Wales, and making sure that you know, jobs are decent for people and that communities and businesses are thriving all over Wales in a positive way. And climate and nature, I mean, I probably don't need to go into this so much, as we've already had some really great presentations on this, but making sure that we're supporting public bodies share as much expertise with each other as much as possible, and really working in that space to be as kind of innovative as possible. We've chosen these missions because health kind of, so for example, health and the level of health inequalities and preventative illnesses in Wales is kind of reaching an all-time high, and was also, there's a lot more research and momentum behind this at the moment in the wake of the COVID pandemic. For example, the inequalities around kind of ethnic minorities and like deaths from COVID, for example. So kind of really recognising that those sort of trends or instances can be disrupted if we all work together on a kind of systems and societal wide level, as well as like stats around the level of diabetes and obesity and things within Wales. Kind of really demonstrates that it's very urgent, as well as kind of demand on health services and budgets and costs and all those things. A wellbeing economy, the economy kind of isn't really delivering for a lot of people in Wales right now, in terms of people on low wages and the high levels of poverty, obviously very closely related to health outcome in Wales. And also relating this back to the rate at which we're using natural resources. So it's kind of looking at how we can change things on quite a fundamental level to deliver for both people and planet. Climate and nature, again, we're kind of risking not meeting targets at the moment on both nature recovery and carbon reduction. So we need to kind of change our approach quite radically. And we're going to do that by, you know, applying the 5 ways of working that we achieve, but also making sure we're drawing from as many experts in the space and bringing people together. As I mentioned, cultural well-being is often quite difficult to understand. It's quite not the most well defined, and I think it's fair to say as an office we probably struggle with that one the most. So trying to do, like, as we're learning, bringing public bodies along with us, sharing their expertise, working with the cultural public bodies as well, because as we know, it can be integrated, for example, in facilitating better conversations about climate change with young people, and sort of integrating that into that involvement piece, as an example. Alongside these 5 missions, we have identified these kind of 2 areas of focus that we'll look at, and there will be others over the next 7 years, but these are the ones that have emerged immediately through the wider research and involvement work that we did to to inform Cymru Can. And firstly, we're kind of looking at food. So it really sits at the intersection of all of those issues. For example, supporting rural economies within Wales, and food and agricultural businesses, supporting nature recovery through sustainable land management. Agricultural workers also have like the highest rate of highest levels of Welsh speaking. I think it's something on average like 40% of farmers speak Welsh in comparison to 20% of the general public. So by supporting the agricultural sector to be more to thrive, then that has really significant impacts on Welsh language. And when you think about things more widely in terms of cultural signifiers of a place, I don't know about you, but every time I go on holiday, I come back raving about the food. And the food, is very food is always very significant to a sense of place, a sense of national identity and things. So recognizing that, as well as the kind of diversity of that within Wales as well. And obviously the food we eat has direct impacts on our health. So if we can kind of identify areas within the food system that we can transform a bit or shift along a bit in other ways, then we potentially deliver a lot of benefits for Wales alongside the kind of general sustainable development principle. And for areas such as Powys, which is so agricultural, I hope this is of interest. AI and digital is another key sort of thing that we're going to focus on, drawing expertise from elsewhere. We will be really interested. It's obviously going to be, and already is, disrupting the world of work. So kind of looking, okay, what's that impact going to be in terms of what the day-to-day work looks like, how working patterns shift, impacts on creative industries, language, all of this. So we'll be kind of looking at what the impacts might be, trying to mitigate any risks there, but also crucially looking how we can use it to maybe speed things up in a more positive way in terms of using data for better health outcomes, or in more developing greater intelligence on how we can cut carbon emissions through more effective, for example, procurement processes or something. There's a lot of possibilities there, which is really exciting. So what's next? We are going to continue the conversation. So yeah, thank you for having me. And no, I'm using up all your time now. But we want to hear from as many of you as possible as we develop this and work with you closely on all the work that you're doing, because it obviously all relates. There's been as I was listening to all the presentations, it obviously aligns very much to the work. Well, your work really aligns with the strategy, which is fantastic. We'll be developing more detailed work plans, so we're going through a bit of a restructure internally at the moment, and to align to the missions more, and as we're doing that, we'll be developing detailed work plans that we'll be able to share with you about what that looks like going forward. But it's all been quite a lot of a transition recently, so please be patient as we work on those. The Future Generations report, the next iteration is 2025. So we are basically every year prior to the Senedd elections, we provide an overview on the kind of state of wellbeing and wellbeing objectives and things within Wales, and setting recommendations on actions that that public bodies and PSBs can do, and how they can set wellbeing objectives effectively. And so our next iteration is 2025. So we're already thinking about how we can make sure it is effective and useful. There's a lot in the last report, so we want to make sure maybe it's a bit more streamlined than last time, and that the recommendations are as useful as possible. And as we go, we want to gather kind of best practice from across Wales and further afield. So I raced through this. Thank you. I'm sorry if I talked too quickly, but there is a recording, which maybe you can put on like 0.5 or something. Thank you very much for having me. I know we've only got 5 minutes, but feel free to email me if we run out of time for questions and things. Thank you. How do I stop sharing now?
You're on mute, Chair.
So thank you, Jenny. Thank you. And again, a comprehensive presentation for us to consider. Are there any questions for Jenny on it? Diane.
Thank you. And as ever, it's probably more just a thought, maybe more than a question. But obviously, the realms we work in are very complex, and I just wondered if you tried to map out across your government kind of groups and colleagues how all of that just links in together. So I'm just thinking about, obviously you're looking at AI, and we've got the Centre for Digital Public Services that are looking at AI, and how do we all kind of make the best use of our time by linking up all those resources, and whether you tried to map that out, and also in terms of the policy decisions that we make and how they influence being able to meet the ambitions of the future generations Wales agenda as well, because we often find that quite complicated at a local level.
So we've all just sort of been split into what our missions we're all working on and things, and our first exercise, stakeholder mapping and organisational mapping. So we're sort of going through that process now. So yes, that will be happening, but it hasn't happened yet, if that makes sense. But thank you for raising it. It's so important. We can talk all we like about working in a systems way, but unless we actually understand the system, it doesn't really happen. So yeah, and then in terms of a policy level, yeah, it is really hard. We'll be producing more and more kind of like guidance as we go as well about what this might look like at different levels of governance and things. So I guess watch this space is my answer, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Any other questions? So it sounds to me, if I may observe, that there's more to come, so to speak. So when you have more sort of flesh on the bones of what you've presented, will you come back to us and
absolutely
do this all again?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll sort of working with the financial year and things. So I think we're sort of in our little mission teams, and we're like planning what our roadmaps are for the next 7 years with, flexibility in there. But yeah, I expect come spring we'll have more content for you. But the full report and the full strategy and the methodology and everything is all online if you'd like to look into it in more detail. I've obviously only given you the headlines there.
Okay, thanks. That's grand. Good. Great. Well, thank you very much. We don't have much left on the agenda now. Just again to extend my thanks to Jenny for coming along today. Strangely enough, for some reason, the PSD does its minutes and matters arising at the end of the meeting, not the beginning. So we have the minutes and matters arising on item 5, pages 33 to 36. I guess we have to approve those. Is that right, Catherine? Yeah.
So yes, please.
Yes. So I need a proposer that we accept the minutes, if everybody's happy. Do I have anybody who could propose that? Thank you, Ewan, and Gavin seconding. So that's good. I'll take silence as being acquiescence. So as long as nobody's got any objection to the minutes as they're written, we'll take those as read. Is there any matter arising from them that we haven't already covered in the meeting that needs urgent attention? I have nothing, but if other members do, Catherine. Oh yes, you had an AOB.
Yeah, well, it's not urgent attention, but it was just to let you all know that I mentioned earlier that last week we had the PSB Scrutiny Committee. So they met. We had the 3 lay members that had been nominated from the different groups. So we had Jennifer Owen Adams, who was a lay member from the PTHB. We had Councillor David Bryan, who is a county councillor in Pembrokeshire, but he was a lay member from the Mid and West Wales Fire Authority, and then also we had Peter Swanson from Pavo. So we had that, and really we used it as a session to inform them about our wellbeing plan, and each of the step leads went through in detail around, you know, the vision of where we're going, what we've achieved so far, and they had the opportunity to ask questions around that and add in, and it was a really useful discussion. And Councillor James, you came along, didn't you, for the first part as well? So we've got more work ongoing with them behind the scenes. We're going to be meeting with, they voted a chair in for the scrutiny group. So Jennifer Owen Adams is taking up that position, and Councillor Gareth E. Jones from Powys County Council is the vice chair. So we're going to be meeting with them, I think, after Christmas, just to touch base. But yeah, they're really interested, and they were very keen on the 3 objectives and where we're heading as a group.
Good. Excellent. I'm glad that went well. Yeah, I did attend, but only to introduce myself, and I felt it better if they could have their discussions without me being there in the background as the PSB chair. So it was literally just for 5 minutes I was there, but I'm glad it went well after that. So thank you. Are there any other matters arising? No? Okay. The dates of the future meetings are to be confirmed, it says here. Catherine will circulate those in due course, presumably in the new year. Yeah, because I think people need to get things in their diaries as soon as possible. Other than that, I have nothing to add other than to say Happy Christmas, Nadolig Llawen to everybody. Have a peaceful one for those who I don't see before then. And we'll see everybody hopefully in the new year in rested and in better spirits. And let's hope everybody avoids getting ill over Christmas, because that's what tends to happen an awful lot. So happy Christmas, one and all. Okay.
Thank you. Happy Christmas all. Bye.
Happy Christmas, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Happy Christmas.
I know.